Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling full-time trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials across the world. I've met many people during my career and have spent many hours on stage and off with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on the weekends with friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with you. Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today. My next guest is somebody who I haven't known all that long, but anytime I have anybody who's under 60 that plays this style, I consider one of the new kids on the block. And it's really deceiving at times when you're playing with musicians that age sort of becomes a non-issue. You forget how old you are, you forget how old they are. And Mr. Peter Cho, hey Peter.
Thanks for having me.
Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, age is just a number, right? That's what everyone.
Well, that's what you tell to all the young ladies in the audience, but at least that's what I say. But you know, I think of you as one of the new kids, obviously, and then I realize that you're actually 2 years older than my son, and so you know, you're in relative terms when you're talking to today's generation, you're getting to be an old man there.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
I mean, I'm 65, so I can say that you're a kid.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that music keeps us all sort of young and level and excited, and so and with this music being so I guess old, well, some people would
you were talking about the style we play, yeah.
Yeah, some people would consider it older. You know, anyone who plays it, I think, anyone who moves it forward or carries the torch. That's a good thing.
I still play with guys that are in their 90s, and they see me as a new kid. You know, because when I first started, I was a kid, and it's wonderful actually. You know, and people like Zane, I guess he's what 24, 25. Somewhere in there. And then I have students that are in high school still that are playing this style. And it's pretty darn cool, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of kids, where were you born?
I was actually born in Kansas, in Wichita, but...
Did you know that I was born in Omaha, Nebraska?
What?
I was born in Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh.
So we were neighbors. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I didn't stay there long. My parents moved to Los Angeles 3 months later. So I pretty much was more or less born and raised here.
Yeah. Now, my parents waited 4 years before we got out of Nebraska. So.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, okay. So LA, when you were a couple months, before you were a year old.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. Was that for a job or? Dad just decided he wanted some ocean happening or what?
Yeah, well, my dad had a brother that was the first of his family to come from South Korea to the States, and they settled on a Chinese restaurant, actually, a Korean-run Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, there are a lot of those actually.
Yeah, so. My dad eventually found work here, or decided to at least try to find work here, and so we moved to LA. I think it was between LA and New York, actually, and he chose Los Angeles.
That's pretty darn cool. So you're actually first generation then?
Second generation.
Okay, well, was your dad born in U.S.?
No, then I am first generation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, my mother was Filipino. My dad was of German descent. So on my mom's side, I was first generation from the Filipino side, but my dad's family's been here for a long time.
Yeah.
No, that's pretty cool. Where in LA did they decide to settle you guys?
I think we first started in Norwalk.
Okay.
And then we moved around a lot. The most time we spent in LA, or what the most time we spent in one particular area was Hancock Park slash Mid City.
Uh-huh.
So sort of like Wilshire, La Brea, near the museum and the tar pits. That's
Was
kind
your
of
dad musical?
no, none of my parents really were.
What got you started into listening to music?
Actually, a really good friend of mine who was a son of a Brazilian diplomat. Um, he he started taking guitar lessons, and I think I was just really, I was just kind of following in his footsteps, and decided to join in these group guitar lessons.
How old were you then?
I probably was 12 or 13. I didn't get serious about music until I was 14.
Yeah, but there's a little. I talk to a lot of the people that I interview, and most of them can identify the time where they went, "I really like that. I want to do that." There's like either an album they listen to, or just a little light goes off somehow.
Yeah, I can definitely tell you when that was. I mean, I was just really into hard rock and heavy metal as a kid, actually. So
We all were, by the way.
yeah, all this trad jazz guys, so into metal. But yeah, when I first heard actually "Sweet Child of Mine" by Guns N' Roses, that opening guitar riff, I think that's one of those opening guitar riffs that every guitar player, at least in my generation, has to learn. So that was really the spark. That
I really wasn't kidding. As you know, I write and teach marching bands and things at the high school level, and I've actually I did a Metallica show for one school, and I've done a Guns N' Roses show for another with marching band. So I'm really
oh
not kidding. That I've always been a kind of a rock fan on top of it all.
yeah, I think there's something synonymous about guitar and rock music, kind of in the same way saxophone is to jazz. You can't, I don't know, to me, it's almost like you can't at least try and play that music if you play guitar.
Oh, you realize, of course, that Dixieland jazz is in fact rock and roll of the 1920s.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what the purpose was. Is they kids found instruments as loud as they could find, and played music that pissed off their parents, and tried to sexual lyrics and lyrics about drugs. And the banjo is the loudest instrument they could find for a chord instrument, and it's just rock and roll. And when I
yeah,
tell that to kids, they're shocked, but it's true.
yeah. I actually read part of Eddie Condon's biography, and yeah, there's a lot of pretty racy stuff in there, and I didn't realize it, but a good friend in New York, a good trumpet player, Mike Davis, told me about that, and uh, yeah, I totally agree with you.
Well, it's well, you don't have. I mean,
I wasn't aware of it
yeah,
until I talked to Mike and read that book.
that's because you never listened to me. No, I'm kidding. Um, I spend a lot. Of course, as you know, I spend a lot of time in Curly's, and I'm fairly opinionated when it comes to music, and I try to help the people I see that can use a nudge here or there. And it's surprising to find out eventually that I actually know what I'm talking about. It's
You do know what you're talking about.
oh God, I've been doing this long enough. Anyway, so yeah, and it's true. The energy is the same. I was talking to a guy named Ray Cadd, who actually is a tuba player and also plays bass, and he's in a rock band right now that he's helping to form called Smoking Guns, I think. And we were talking about that energy. The energy is the same. It's that's differentiating those two styles is era. You know,
Yeah.
it was exactly the same intent. Just another little tidbit for you here. Somebody asked Duke Ellington why he started playing music. And here's somebody who's considered the dean of all music. You
Sure.
know what he said? Get girls.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
I
not.
mean, I would extend it to almost. I mean, there's so many styles of music that have so many crossover uh, similarities with each other. So
Well,
I would
musicians are
say,
musicians, no matter what era and what style you're talking. I mean, I'm actually being honest. No matter what style and what era you're talking about, it's a business about uh, communicating passion.
yeah. I mean, I feel the same way with bluegrass. I'm learning a lot of bluegrass now, and I feel exactly the same. The energy and the just sort of that aggressive intent of the music and the driving nature of it. It's all very similar to me.
Yeah. Well, especially with bluegrass, when you've got the 5 string rolls going, it just
Yeah,
gets your heart pumping,
yeah,
especially as a player. Um, it's just that constant rhythm that
yeah,
that's makes you go. It's like caffeine, you know.
totally. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love so many styles of music.
Okay,
Um,
when you started playing guitar, what were you listening? Were you shooting for the heavy metal thing?
yeah, so that's what I really started with, and then uh, I I'm not sure if it was a band, but my brother, I kind of coerced him into playing drums. Well, first I coerced him into getting a drum set, and then and I loved Van Halen too. So people made fun of us. They called us Van Cho. Um,
Well, gosh, I mean Eddie Van Halen. My God, what a monster
yeah,
on
yeah,
guitar.
yeah. Still inspiring to this day, and still kind of really unmatched. I was really inspired by all of that music, and so my brother and I we would play a lot of those covers, and then we would write some songs too. But I didn't necessarily have like I guess quote unquote a band. We just jammed a lot together, and then I got into jazz in high school, sort of briefly.
Yeah, but then you have to learn the thirds of the chords.
Oh yeah, right, and several chords.
I mean, metal. All you have to have is 1 and 5. It's like being a tuba player. Just those power chords. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Oh no, no, that's okay. Yeah, it was funny. The first day of jazz, I remember it was like my sophomore year, and we had to play seventh chords. And I remember a guitar player, or I don't know if it was player or piano player, was asking me like, "You don't know how to play seventh chords, man?"
And he's talking dominant 7, right? Not even major 7.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even really know the difference back
What
then.
school did you go to?
I went to LACES. It's short for Los Angeles Center for Enriched Studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, um, is that academic or is that an art school?
Yeah, it's more. I would say it's more of an academically focused school. It was a great school. Our yeah.
Tell me you're a math whiz. What 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 got you into that? What made you want to get into that school or got you into that school?
Uh, Honestly, I feel like I was just lucky. I think I know that there was a lottery system to get into that school, and I sort of got in last minute. I was actually um, attending another high school for about a week, and I was waitlisted, and somehow uh, I got through and got to go to a school that was local because the school that I was at for a week was pretty far away. It was in the valley. Um,
The reason I ask, by the way,
yeah,
is one of the running threads through all of these people I've talked to is high intelligence and high tech. A lot of the Dixieland guys are mathematicians, chemists. Les Deutsch is a JPL rocket scientist.
yeah.
So literally, a lot of these guys that we play music with, not me, by the way, but
Not me either. Not me.
so that's why I was asking because that sounds like a school you need to have some brains to get into.
I mean, I think I'm okay at math and sciences. I'm just I know people that do that for a living, and I don't think I'm anywhere close to that.
Well, you must have had something because I know schools like that don't accept everybody. So there you
Yeah,
have it.
yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. You were talking about your high school jazz band.
Yeah, so well, I sort of got my first uh, exposure to jazz through that, because again, I basically have no musical background from my parents or family at all. Um, so that really was my first exposure to jazz, or almost any kind of music that was outside of what you would hear on the radio. So I actually didn't really like it at first. I think being such a heavy metal and rock kid, um, I think it was not the music of my people.
No, no, I understand.
Yeah, yeah,
When I was growing up, it was jazz versus the Beatles, or or the Stones, or that era of
yeah,
'60s, '70s music uh,
yeah,
coming up. So I understand what you're talking about.
yeah. But I did see that I could grow through an experience like that, so I stuck with it. Um, I'm
Was your
sure.
was your high school instructor a jazz guy?
Oh yeah. Well, he did both. He was the music teacher for all of the music classes. So he would teach orchestra or coach orchestra and jazz band. But his jazz piano, I think he had a definite appreciation and talent for jazz piano, or just jazz in general.
Sure.
Yeah, and that did leave a mark, even though at the time I did not play jazz very well or was interested at all. Um, so yeah, that was my high school
Did he
sort of.
give you a chord book? How did you learn about the chords and the
Oh
theory part of it?
yeah, so McCabe's, that
Sure. McCabe's
music
music.
store in Santa Monica, still around, still a great store. I found out that one of the guitar players in our group was taking lessons there. So I sought out maybe about a month of lessons. And I remember them being just really hard
Who was the
uh,
teacher?
in the beginning. His name was Pete Snell. I think he's still there.
Hmm.
Yeah, he's a great player. I think they were just really hard because I think fundamentally, musically, um, I, I'm not even sure if I had a whole lot of knowledge about music fundamentals. So, uh, you know, learning about arpeggios and learning about, you know, um, what scales fit over what chord and 2-5-1s and all that stuff. That was all brand new to me. But I do have to interject.
Sure.
I did learn some of that actually with another great teacher, who I actually learned a lot of. I actually learned, he was kind of like my rock guitar teacher, but he taught at Musicians Institute actually.
Uh-huh.
And so I went there for, I probably saw him for about 2 years. And what was unique about him was he didn't just teach me the songs I wanted to learn, he taught me about um, how to improvise. And I think that kind of coupled with the fact that I was sort of flirting with jazz at the school, I think that kind of started something.
Well, I think if I remember right, and I might be wrong, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I first met you, you were still laying heavily into the pentatonic scales and kind of that rock motif,
I
perhaps.
I I don't know.
I'm just saying, usually guys who come from rock,
Yeah.
and like I said, to me, you're still a younger player. Guys who come out of local college systems and things, even the
Well,
jazz players tend to
sure.
rely heavily on pentatonic.
Well, I had already been playing a different style of jazz before I met you,
Right,
so
more modern stuff.
more modern stuff. So I think I was over that by then. My 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 banjo skills. I mean, you saw like
The
just
beginnings.
from, yeah, just from playing with the band at Curly's. I, I think all of you guys saw my development just from almost pretty much ground zero on the banjo. Um, but the banjo, as you know, is also a very chordal instrument.
Depends on which tuning you're playing, but yes.
Yeah. But for the particular plectrum style banjo,
Right.
and in a Dixieland group, and as far as how I heard it and how I was taught, and I'm sure we can get into that later, I heard it as a very chordal instrument, even in terms of soloing. So when it came to
Right.
solo,
That would lead you directly to plectrum.
exactly. So when I came to soloing, I still think and I thought then of chord soloing as sort of the approach.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just wondering because it just depends on who you are and what you listen to initially. But as you know, tenor is the same as viola tuning, and it lends itself more to single line stuff. So it the fact that you heard
That's true. Yeah.
chord soloing is, I mean, we can. I guess we can actually get to that now since we're talking about it. Who were the first banjo players you heard that made you go, "Hey, I could probably get work doing this"? What was? When did that happen?
That happened about 8 years ago, or no, 7 years ago, 2013. The first person I really heard doing that style was on YouTube watching Doug Maddox.
Okay,
And
not a bad guy to hear.
yeah. And after that, it was Eddie Peabody
Yeah.
and Harry Reeser. Um,
Well, Harry Reeser, of course, is a tenor player, but
yeah.
that's who you hear with bands. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it all started really from there. And I remember not being sure, but I think I contacted Doug through his website or through his YouTube channel. And I didn't hear back for a few days. And then he gave me a call back. And we got together. And I can't say enough good things about Doug. He's basically been my trad jazz mentor, banjo mentor.
Now, before
Funny
you got
guy.
before
Yeah,
the banjo days,
yeah.
and when you first started playing jazz guitar, who were the guys you wanted to emulate or listen to?
Oh, well, so I played. So there's a long trajectory. Different. I'll try to keep this brief. So when
You
I
don't
got
have to. I don't have any time limits for you.
oh
Right now, you're my last interview of the day.
okay. So when I got into college, my undergrad, I actually was not sure about studying. I did major in music, but I wasn't sure about studying classical guitar as a major or jazz as a major. And I think because I was into Steve Morse and the Dixie Dregs, who I still think is a great musician, pretty much one of my favorites. He played classical guitar, and then he also played all these other styles like bluegrass and a little bit of jazz and rock, southern rock, and all this cool stuff. So I think that's what influenced me to end up taking classical guitar as an undergrad. And so I took that really seriously. And then later, in my mid-20s, I decided, well, I don't think I can get very much work as a classical guitar player. And more
You
importantly,
just end up doing a lot of weddings.
yeah, and I think there are only maybe like a handful, probably like 5 or 6 people that are really at that top level doing that for a living. And even then, I think a lot of them do other things as well.
Oh yeah.
But I also, more importantly than just finding not finding enough work for that, there was this need for me to kind of go back to my roots, and so I wanted to get back into jazz playing, and I also wanted to get back into my rock playing. So I actually enrolled at USC, and I did the studio jazz program there, which was a perfect program for me because it wasn't just jazz. It sort of encompassed a lot of different styles. And so there, I studied with Carl Verheyen and Bruce Foreman. Bruce Foreman, I still feel like is still one of my biggest influences for jazz guitar. And I got an amazing uh, few lessons with him. And so,
Now, did he steer you towards like the more of the Joe Pass thing?
yeah, he's a real bebop guy. So
Okay.
I actually listened to a lot of horn players instead of guitar players. He was always more interested in non-guitar players, and so that's what drew me into it even more. I mean, there's so many great guitar players, but
No, I'm saying that's a really insightful teacher that he just didn't launch you into like, the Joe Passes or Django Reinhardt's right immediately.
yeah, I mean, I still think that those players, guitar players, are amazing. But in jazz, when I hear a good horn player, when I hear Charlie Parker, that for whatever reason that excites me a lot more. I mean, I still love Wes Montgomery. Joe Pass obviously is great, and then newer players, the newer generation like
Sure.
Pat Metheny and all those guys are great. But I just really like listening to horn players um, for that particular style, that bebop uh, post swing style on guitar. And then after that, many years later, in 2013, that's when I decided to try and expand my profile even more. And so uh, that's where I got into trad jazz. And again, like I was saying, the first person I listened to was Doug Maddox on YouTube.
Now, on my channel where I'm dropping all my music, I don't know if you've seen that one. It's called Daniel E. Zeilinger. And I actually there's actually a lot of pictures of you on that on YouTube. And the reason is because originally I had, when the shutdown happened,
Yeah,
a lot of our fans there at Curly's, of course, that's their social life. They live for those Friday nights to see their friends and hear some music. And so when the lockdown happened at Curly's, I took some not cassette tapes. I took some recordings that Mike Olson had done of the band just so he could hear himself play, and he sent them all out to me to listen to. And so I divided up into tunes and I dropped them with slideshows of the pictures Marlis always takes. And so I don't know if the channel is called Daniel E. Zeilinger on YouTube. And so there's 11 episodes now of that have just slideshows and the band playing. You might be on a few of the recordings and you're definitely in a lot of the pictures. and then so I got so good at that, I started dropping some of my older bands, a lot of things with Brad Roth in it, and that kind of stuff. So that might be something you might be interested in checking out because there's just all kinds of great banjo players on banjo playing on that, and you can look at yourself. So,
yeah, for sure.
So it's kind of a cool thing. So I've got two channels. I've got that one, and I have this one with the Trad Jazz Todays.
Cool.
I'm sorry. I know it's a plug. Make sure you subscribe. No, I'm kidding. I'm talking to the audience, not to you. So it's kind of coolness. We were at your guitar teachers at USC. I'm organizing in my head. And so you start seeing Doug on YouTube, and so the thing between plectrum and tenors interests me because tenor is actually more of a band playing style, the Harry Reeser stuff, and because of course in the 1920s, you know this. I'm saying this mostly for the audience that aren't musicians.
Sure. Yeah.
There were a lot of viola players that got out of work, and especially when jazz started taking over. So a lot of those guys switched over to tenor banjo. Tuning's the same, and fingerings are the same, except with frets, which makes it even easier. and it's based on single line on solo lines. for that. That's why Harry Reeser plays the way he does. And of course, Doug is a great guy because he plays everything you're talking about.
Yeah.
He plays all the tunings in all the styles.
And bluegrass too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's, I mean, I honestly wouldn't be talking to you if I hadn't met him. I mean, he's a huge influence on me and still is.
I'll tell you, Peter, what you've got to do. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. No, he's a great person to learn from.
Yeah.
It's really funny. We used to drive people crazy when we recorded in the early days of Banjo Mania because he would play 5-string mainly on a lot of those things. Oh, actually, he did both parts. I don't know if you know that. But on a lot of the recordings, he did the tenor parts too, and Steve didn't.
Uh-huh.
But we would be playing these tunes, those tunes that are on that album, and it's impossible to play 5-string on them. And what we would do is if we did a key change, we'd cut tape and he'd capo up to put in the new tuning on 5-string. And 5-stringers would listen to those albums just go, how did it, what? You know, because he's doing roles that don't exist and things.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think he was always great at just making it work for the gig. That was his main objective.
Did he tell you the story about why he stopped bringing every banjo he owns on his gigs?
I think so.
Because he used to bring one of everything on stage with him. And one day a lady came up here and says, well, aren't they just all banjos?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And he went. So then he invented that. Well, he didn't invent it, but he started having that 5-string where he could pull that 5th string over and have the instant lock tuners. Yep. Smart guy, smart stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was actually thinking of doing the same thing because I think I started with a 5-string as well, and I took the 5th string off, and I didn't do exactly what he did. But
you talking about that blonde thing you played without the resonator on it?
Yeah, right.
The open back flailing banjo. Yeah.
Yeah. The clawhammer style.
Which is a great style. It's just not, it's not exactly a Dixieland style.
Yeah, and it wasn't nearly capable enough to compete with all you guys because it just wasn't loud enough. There was no resonator, and it was a good banjo to start on. But
yeah, that's of course why like people like Doug and John Reynolds and stuff. That's why they all go to Dobros and Nationals when they want to play guitar with those groups, because you get shot if you put an amplifier on stage, and those things are much louder than conventional guitars. So.
Yeah.
Have you got one yet?
I don't. I'm actually thinking of getting a guitar like Katie Cavera's, the Lore, which is sort of similar to an L5.
Yeah, well, they're the story behind the Lore name is actually there was a designer that worked for Gibson, Lore, and especially his mandolins are just world famous for having that special something that nobody could figure out. And when I found out she was playing a Lore, she was playing a fake Gibson basically, but but that's what the Lore brand is they kind of are playing off that name.
Yeah.
It is very much like an L5.
Yeah. I need a acoustic guitar that's, punchy enough. Right now I have a Joe Pass guitar, but it's not loud enough. So I think I need something basically just acoustic that can cut through a band. Yeah.
Well, an L5 and an L7s, those big-bodied Gibsons aren't going to give you a lot of volume. They're accurately correct, and they work with string bass players. But you get a tuba and 2 cornets, and you've got to get something with more punch than even that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why Django played those Selmers and the McAferrys.
Yeah.
Is although they were an open hole guitar, they had resonators inside, a resonating surface also. Yeah. That really punched the sound out. I know too much about this stuff for a tuba player, I know. But what can I say? When you teach and sit around banjo players all the time, you'll pick up stuff.
Yeah, I feel like you might know more about banjo and guitar playing than some banjo and guitar players.
I've got such small hands. Seriously, you saw the Brad interview, No, I tell them about the time, the only few times I picked up a banjo, people immediately took it away from me. Said, don't
Uh,
do that. But no. Um, Although I really love the instruments. I love both of the sounds of those. Just, I used to I used to manage a music store in Irvine for about 3 years. And so I had to learn how to play enough to sell things, but not enough to be a real player. So, yeah, well, coolness. And so your banjo studies, you're still taking that. Are you still taking lessons from anybody or seeing Doug about it or?
no, I actually, I'm a little bit ashamed to say this, but I'll just say it. Um, I haven't practiced the banjo seriously in a while because I've been focusing on a few different styles of music. One is bluegrass, and I've been playing bluegrass for a little while. There's a great young scene of bluegrass players in New York. There's also a great trad scene in New York, which
Oh, yeah.
I was somewhat part of too. But the bluegrass scene in New York is just so vibrant and exciting, and so I got really into it when I was there. And recently, I bought a Martin 1960 D18, and so I've just been in hog heaven, just playing the guitar all day, and trying to learn those Tony Rice licks and stuff like that. So I haven't played trad banjo in a while, like very seriously as I did before. But
Sure. Yeah,
Katie
when
and
you're doing those duels with Katie and stuff, you had to be on your game.
yeah, and actually, it's going to come back into my practicing because Katie and I during this shutdown, because we live in the same area.
Uh-huh.
We're practically neighbors.
Yeah, I interviewed her too.
Yeah, every Wednesday we get together, and we've been right now we've been working on bluegrass tunes and to put out
Sure.
someday. But I thought, well, we have 4 bluegrass tunes that we're doing. Why not do 4 trad tunes too and come out with an album? And so that's hopefully going to be done in the near future.
Yeah, she's great. She's actually collaborating with all kinds of people right now.
Yeah.
On that stuff. In fact, she and I are talking about doing one, and we're doing one for the jazz club in Duarte, I think, coming up. And I don't know where she finds the time.
Yeah,
Because just with this interview show, the time it takes me to edit these things,
yeah,
I can't imagine the hours she's putting in with all the stuff she's doing.
yeah. Oh, she's in high demand. I mean, for all the right reasons. I mean, she's a great musician.
Oh yeah,
So
very talented, relentless time.
Yeah.
Not hard to look at, and just one of the nicest people in the world. You know,
Yeah.
what can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky, thankful to have her as kind of a neighbor and friend.
Oh, I bet. I mean,
Yeah.
I envy you. It's like, this is what I really meant to say, but because I'm still down here in Anaheim, and all you guys are up there having parties.
Well, you're close to Brad and Doug, so.
That's true. That's true. Of course, we won't get into that, but I don't have my own. Well, I have Tom Liston down here also. So
Yeah, that's true.
he's
Yeah,
not too shabby himself.
yeah, he's great.
And he plays, once again, he plays everything. Tom plays 5-string and tenor and plectrum and mandolin and trombone and tuba.
You know, I think that's a big difference with this style versus a lot of other styles. When I was in like, a rock group with my brother, I mean, I couldn't think of any other instrument to play except for guitar. But I think it's just so accepted in trad jazz or bluegrass to kind of double or triple or quadruple on a
Well,
bunch
you know
of
what it is, Peter. There's a reason for that, and that is money.
Yeah.
No, seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
for a lot of the trad guys, and I know a lot of the bluegrass guys are the same way. You book a gig, and then you book the people you can get, and whatever you can't get, you cover yourself. And that's kind of how that happens. I mean, I actually sent Doug a bluegrass wedding reception at some point in time, and also all of this interlacing we have with our friends just opens up the possibility for work for everybody, you know? And if you can cover more than one instrument, I mean, that's why Katie ended up on bass. And she's now an internationally known bass player.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a matter of getting some work, you know, like the
Yeah.
rest of us.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And that's actually what drew me to, well, part of what drew me to trad jazz anyway, just to expand my palette and try to get more work.
Yeah. Well, Peter, just as as an old fart who gives you way too much advice, uh, people who want to get into jazz, it's so crazy when I teach and I ask kids if they ever listen to any old jazz. And they said, "You mean really old jazz?" I go, "Yeah, really old jazz." She goes, "You mean like Dizzy?" You went, "Well, no, but you know what I'm saying?"
Yeah.
And so when you come that direction, when you come from Jamie Abersol play along albums and all these big band charts and things that they're teaching in school, and then you try to go back to Louis Armstrong and Bung Johnson and even as far back as Freddie Green for string players, they don't get it. You say no. This is where it started, and this is how the evolution works. For you to, for you to play like that guy, you know.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is that it's only been around for really 100 years. So it's not that old in terms of, I mean, classical music, I mean, has been around for a lot longer. So it's interesting. I mean, you can really study it in a finite way because there's just 100 years.
You definitely would enjoy an interview I did with a guy named Tamás Istas, who's actually a Hungarian violin player who has a band in Budapest, who's teaches classical violin at the local university, and then he started a ragtime jazz band.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about, we were talking about this very subject about the earlier style before jazz even existed, and I didn't realize that Monteverde, who was a composer, used to just write lead lines and figured bass and tell the orchestra to fill in the middle parts.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would definitely improvise that middle, between the melody and the bass line, which is what we're all doing with jazz. So it's interesting that I think our definitions need to change or to be looked at again as far
Yeah.
as what is what. That's always been a big discussion among jazz guys.
Yeah.
What is jazz? And
Yeah.
my favorite answer is the one that Bill Dundle gave me. And he has his master's in curriculum design and a banjo player. I said, "Bill, what's the definition of jazz?" And he looked at me and said, "If you think you're playing it, you are." I went, "Okay." But that's I'm sorry for taking up so much time explaining things.
Oh, no.
But that's kind of what you're saying. Bluegrass and classical and some of the styles. I was talking to a guy named Les Benedict who plays Civil War instruments. He's also a trad jazz player. I just talked to Charlie Warren, who was at Disneyland for 40 years.
Oh, yeah, I know Charlie.
But he got into Renaissance Recorder and Serpent, and
Yeah.
when you sing trad, you're talking about, you want to talk about trad,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that jazz education, I mean, that probably influences the way people think about what jazz is and who the players are and what time period it comes from. So, yeah, as hopefully,
the other thing that happens a lot with scholastics is you have these guys teaching jazz band in high school who aren't jazz players at all. And those guys tend to settle into like 60s funk and things that don't have a swung eighth note because they just don't get it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So I think a lot of the jazz education, unfortunately, it sounds a little weird to say, but it's sort of dated probably because it's not necessarily all encompassing of the style, and maybe only has a few particular eras or players in mind. So people naturally, I mean, I definitely was guilty of this as well. Learning jazz, I kind of thought it was from a certain era, and I think it was just because I wasn't taught what uh, where the beginnings of jazz, came from, and how it was developed, and etc.
Yeah, well, it's not your fault, obviously. I mean, to say that you're guilty of the same thing, everybody who's kind of a victim of the way that the curriculum is set up in our education system. Interesting thing. I was just talking about that Hungarian guy, and he was there while they were still communist, and in the interim. And of course, they weren't even allowed access to Western music or sheet music before the wall fell, and he was saying that it was. Where am I going with this, Dan? Oh, he was talking about their university system, and I was telling him how guilty our systems are of not teaching beginning jazz. He says, well, you know what's crazy, Dan, is the fact that the institutions here, the education system here for music, was based on the United States, and they don't do it either. Because when it became an open society, they looked to the United States for their education system formats. And so he's saying the same thing, they're over there teaching, Clark Terry, and not those guys aren't wonderful, but that's their old music, is
Yeah.
60s and 50s.
But I'm glad I discovered it. I mean, it's.
I'm laughing because we're such
I'm just glad I discovered it just for making new friends. Honestly, I think part of that community aspect of trad jazz is so important. I think that's also what stands out in this music, the community aspect, which I don't think is there in a lot of other kinds of music. So I think everyone, I think a lot of people are honest with each other, and people are also supportive of supportive of each other at the same time, which is really what needs to be there to help the music go forward. I think, my opinion, and that's I feel like, as far as like what stands out to me, like what I'll remember from learning this music and playing with all you guys is the people. So
well, that's exactly why I started the channel.
Yeah,
actually, I learned so much from sitting around dinner tables and musicians lounges with the old guys, listening to them talk. And you're right, the people in the style love to share. Not that I'm guilty of that, but you know what I'm saying. We're anxious to keep the style going. We're anxious to give our knowledge to the people who want to learn it.
Yeah.
It's not a protected. It's not always a protected thing. There are a few individuals that aren't into that. But one of the problems we always run into, Peter, just to let you know ahead of time here, not that you I don't think you've run into it yet, but the old guard sometimes really resents younger people coming in. And I'm talking about audiences, not so much musicians.
Oh, I've experienced that. I've run into that a few times. I mean, I think also, just the fact that I look the way I look and am who I am, I think surprises a lot of people. I mean, how many Korean American bald men do you see playing banjo? I mean, it's just not very common.
It depends. Well, yes, you're right. Yeah, I was going to say it depends on where you are, but there are a lot of guys looking like you playing Dixieland in other parts of the world.
That's true.
But in my era, now remember, I was born in '54. Jesus, and I'm a dark-skinned Filipino, or at the one time, and so people just don't, because you don't match their concept of who should be playing that music. There is some crazy prejudice happening in those ways,
Yeah.
I fit right in with the Cuban band when I was playing high note trumpet. That was never an issue. But the minute I started in Dixieland and stuff, not only was I darker, and Filipino and young, and all three of those things. And you're still, that's one of my favorite things about this style is what you're about 40 now.
Hmm.
You're still considered the kid.
Yeah.
When I got into the style and I was in college and I came out of it I'm still considered the kid to people like Robbie Rhodes and some of the older school guys.
Yeah.
And I'm 65 for Christ's sake. It's crazy. You have an advantage of looking very young, of course, for your age. Even no, you right?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
the fact that you shaved your head helps with that illusion.
yeah.
But you look 28.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's nice. That's really kind of you to say. I mean, I think being Asian doesn't hurt. I mean, I think our genes work well in terms of aging gracefully. But yeah, I think that I did run into that old guard sort of problem sometimes. Sometimes it wasn't necessarily something that was that overt, but I think it took some convincing for a lot of people to maybe it was some sort of like way to maybe I felt like there was this way I had to prove myself in a situation. But I will say though that I mean, if people don't know who I am, I have to prove myself. I mean, that's just how it goes. And so I think some of that was also in my head too. So
No, you're absolutely right. I was talking to John Van Houten and Charlie Warren and Paul Wilson, these older, not that much older than I am, but guys who were already playing it when I got into the style, and they all met me when I was a trumpet player. And I was telling these guys that I still feel like some of these guys that I know look at me and they think they're sort of going, well, he's really a trumpet player. He's kind of a fraud. And the fact of the matter is, I was never a serious tuba student ever. And I sort of fell into the style and I learned the tunes and I just happened to have a good ear. So I understand what you're talking about. And it's not it's even more than the perception from other people, is maybe somehow it's a perception of ourselves. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah,
The doubt that happens when you walk into a situation.
yeah. And I think you can easily psych yourself out, especially, well, I mean, I was psyching myself out because I was thinking, well, I got into this style a little later and
Yeah.
these folks have had so much experience and know far more tunes than I do.
Tell me about your New York experience. Now, you took
Sure.
off from New York. What was that?
Yeah.
Did you get to work with Bria Schoenberg or Woody Allen or any of these guys?
I got to work with people who knew those guys and played with those guys.
Oh, I do
Well,
that.
by association. Yeah, so no, I did work with Mike Davis. He was and is a great trumpet player, one of the young guys over there. He led a band called Mike Davis and the New Wonders. And this year, actually, they got invited to the Newport Jazz Festival.
Oh, great.
But because of the shutdown, it didn't work out. But hopefully it will in the future. But I subbed for that band. There's a banjo player there already, great banjo player named Jared Engel. But yeah, I got to know a lot of the trad jazz community through those guys. And I also sat down with Dan Levinson and we talked about tunes and
another good guy who likes to share and pass on knowledge.
Yeah. We talked about learning the 300 tunes that were on a list that I came up with on a spreadsheet.
How did you like dealing with the fact that changes and arrangements definitely have a coastal influence? That even casual chord changes mostly is what I'm referring to.
Yeah,
they're a little bit different on the East Coast than they are in California.
Yeah. I'm not sure I had a whole lot of experience with that because when I played when I played a lot of the standards, I don't remember changing all that much. I mean, I was only in New York for 2 years, and I also was heavily involved in the musical scene. I wasn't just doing trad jazz, but
I'm sorry. The musical scene, you must have been really had an advantage playing different axes.
oh yeah. Well, I played musicals for 10 years in LA before encountering any of the big musicals I did in New York. So I had experience already. I must have played like 8 or 9 musicals here.
That's a
So when
big
I got
advantage
there,
of having real banjo. You know, a lot of those guys in the pits buy a 6-string banjo and just sort of fake it.
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
different sound.
yeah. I mean, my teacher at USC, Carl Verheyen, who's a big studio ace. He was always a proponent of telling somebody, well, if someone asked if you played a certain instrument and you didn't, say yes and buy it later. um, which I've done a couple times.
Get the
Yeah,
work.
yeah. And I done that for a ukulele, and I did that um, for a mandolin actually. So yeah, so by the time I got there, I think I had enough experience in both of those things, trad jazz and musicals, to uh, to sort of to, to do something with it.
Do you like the pit?
Yeah,
No, no, you know what I'm talking about. I did a lot of them when I was in college and freshly out of college, but it takes a special person to stay awake and to wait for the cues that are coming up and to know which one of the people are going to forget their lines. I
yeah,
mean, it's a whole different gig, as you
yeah,
know.
yeah. You're right. I actually, when I got to New York and started playing the bigger off Broadway and Broadway musicals, I realized just how difficult it is because you start in as a sub, or you start as a sub, and so basically um, you're having to duplicate exactly what the original player, how the original player is playing, what the original player is playing in terms of the fingering and everything to get it to sound exactly like them. So basically, the conductor has to look down, and other than seeing a different face, you kind of have to just sound just right, like just exactly
You've got to
like.
sound like the cast album.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was really difficult for me at first. But like anything, you know, I I worked really, I, I worked real hard on it, and like anything, if you work really hard doing something, um, eventually you make some headway. And so I'm glad I did. Took a little while, as things do, but it was a real challenge in the beginning.
Oh yeah, you've got to be a reading monster because anytime that clock's running, dollars are being spent.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know. So did you get into any studio work?
Well, I guess that was sort of the extent of the studio work. Well, actually, that's not true. There were a few sort of ancillary things that were related to musical theater that ended up becoming studio work. Um, that was actually a lot easier, I found, because you got the music ahead of time, and well, you got the music ahead of time sometimes for the musicals too. But I found that the
Well, not
recording,
when you're subbing. I mean, your reading shops have to really be on point if you're subbing out it in musicals.
yeah, yeah. Well, they gave us some time even with the subbing too. They gave us well, I usually got about 3 weeks or a month. Not a lot of time, but with the recording stuff, you know, I usually had more time, and it was usually only for like 1 or 2 songs, so it wasn't as I mean, it was still demanding, but it just I felt like there was a lot less pressure.
Sure.
Yeah. There was quite a lot of pressure on those musical gigs. I remember just sweating bullets.
Oh
So
yeah. Well, I mean, those things are so um, so timed. that you can't, things can't, there's no wiggle space,
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand it. So now we have you back in California. I'm so glad of that. I hope to see you more once we get out of this, once we get the ability to play again.
Yeah.
All right, Peter. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
You take care, and you're in my thoughts.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Bye.